Kumede. Arabile, what's going on today?
Well, it has been an interesting week overall, and I suppose today just kind of sets the tone as exactly what has happened this week as well. Central banks in key focus, the state as well of the United States economy has seemed to have boosted a few indices as well, particularly in the US. So we are seeing the Dow Jones Industrial as one of the only ones to have gone down around 1/10% yesterday as well. But all the others seem to have performed relatively well. South Africa, however, not doing as well as it perhaps could, and the rand as well suffering through a little bit of that, around 13.45 against the US dollar. But let's take a look at how other European markets and the local market are faring before we head into just a distinct look into the markets. 6,616 for a single Bitcoin. That's in US dollars, and it's 91,754 as well for a Bitcoin in the South African rand. Warwick Lucas from Galileo Capital joining us this afternoon. Warwick, thank you so much for the time again. As I said a little bit earlier, central banks were a key focus this week. They seem to have made their move, especially after the Fed.
Absolutely. I mean, we're seeing the situation really, global liquidity tide is basically going out, and I think now we're going into a period where we're going to see who's actually been swimming naked, and the net result is it's an environment that's risk off, and in that kind of environment I'm afraid quite a lot of currencies get smacked against the currency, and our dear old rand is no exception.
Yeah, 13.42 rather against the US dollar for now. Is 14 too far? Is that a bridge too far, you think, in this risk off trade, as you say?
It seems a bit far, but currency market sometimes takes no prisoners. I mean, if we look at other currencies, most of them all weak against the dollar. Take the example of the Australian dollar. That's also been looking pretty weak there. So generally, right now, the US dollar looking king at the moment.
Yeah, Australian dollar to the ZAR is at 10.04 as well. If we were to take that into context. The risks then of seeing the ECB saying that they're going to taper off on quantitative easing despite an economy that isn't necessarily, blowing the lights out, especially in Europe. Is that a safe bet, or is it just the case of it's no longer necessary to have that stimulus package?
Well, I think most central banks always like to let their verbal activity and their talking ahead of time do what they would have to otherwise achieve in action. So by talking about liquidity being withdrawn, they're obviously hoping that that precautionary kind of tone will mean that when the time actually comes to taper off and even hike rates, that they have to do a less of a harsh job than otherwise was the case, because interest rates are very blunt instruments and take no prisoners.
A topic of keen interest for you, currency trading funds. I mean, we've just spoken about the rand. Should you be getting in?
I would be very, very careful, and the reason is that those funds really, although there's quite a lot of valid strategies out of there, I mean, the currencies are very efficient markets. They in some ways zero-sum games that I feel, and there's also quite a lot of gearing and therefore a lot of borrowing in those to get acceptable returns. And of course, in an environment of rising interest rates, well, borrowing is going to get expensive. So my precautionary note there is be careful of magical solutions like that.
Yeah, and if you're in there, you need to make sure you stick to what you know, I suppose, right?
Very much so. That rules are being followed, that risk disciplines are being followed, and the compliance is 100% correct, because it's important to actually do what's been said there, and that rules get followed, because the problem with currencies is when you get trend changes, they can get very ugly and they can wipe it out quite quickly.
Yeah. On the equity front, Steinhoff has been called many names. Coronation now calling it a wipeout. The aspect of that company, is there really a restart button at any point?
Not really, and I think most of the shareholder litigation that we saw coming in really was a big part of the problem. I mean, once you start with shareholder litigation, you've basically got one shareholder saying that I'm more important than the rest of the shareholders. So it then causes them all to follow through and join, and then it becomes a zero-sum game. So in the meantime, I mean, there was valid litigation to be had there. For example, if the VEB had straight away gone after auditors Deloitte instead of focusing on Steinhoff. And I think it's now too late. I mean, no one is really going to refinance and refund Steinhoff unless they've got some comfort that their funds aren't going to get caught up in some kind of ridiculous shareholder lawsuit. So I think it's created more destruction than protection for investors there.
So a change in the board management, is that going to help anybody or anything?
Unfortunately, too late at this stage. I think so, unless there's a serious reset amongst the litigants.
Quick one then on the World Cup. Who you're following?
Okay, well, I'm trying to be as agnostic as possible. I'm following whoever the bookies are saying there, and there's no free lunches in betting there, so I think the main thing is just enjoy the match.
I mean, that's probably the interesting element, right? Now, betting becomes, very hyped up as we head into this World Cup, and it really gets going. How risky does that even become in itself as well? Okay,
so in the last World Cup, I basically ran a bookies odds series of trades, you could call it, on that market. Basically, a bookies odds portfolio comes out in the top 2 to 5%. So if you think you're better than that, then maybe you should bet. Otherwise, I think just enjoy the matches. It's actually really hard money.
Great fun indeed. Of course, some great matches coming up. Warwick Lucas from Galileo Capital, thank you so much for the time. It's been an interesting market flow, as we said. It has been probably the most important week of the year. All the central banks, Trump meeting with Kim Jong-un as well. All of it is culminated in today ending, of course, but I think the best bet and the safest bet for the weekend is to enjoy the World Cup.